Betsy and Thomas here for the American Intelligence Media. Today we're looking at the tweets of August 11th, 2018. Why isn't the FBI giving Andrew McCabe text massages to Judicial Watch or appropriate governmental authorities? FBI said they won't give up even one. I may have to get involved. Do not destroy. What are they hiding? McCabe's wife took big campaign dollars from Hillary people.
Shall we go on to the next one?
Oh, sure.
Since it has ...
Sure. Will the FBI ever recover its once stellar reputation, so badly damaged by Comey, McCabe, Peter S., and his lover, the lovely Lisa Page, and other top officials now dismissed or fired? So many of the great men and women of the FBI have been hurt by these clowns and losers.
Clowns is a word used on the internet to basically indicate rogue CIA. Isn't that interesting? That he's calling them clowns and losers. Now, he could just be calling them, the clowns that they are, but this is no longer a joke anymore. And so when he calls them clowns, I assume that he's basically saying, he's calling them out as the shadow government. He's calling them out as, deep state operatives. But let's go back to the very first part of these two tweets that were put together. And again, it's always an honor, Betsy, to be decoding these with you and to be finding the meaning between the lines, because the real news of the day is Donald Trump. Anything else is not old, not news, it's old. And as we know, there's no reason whatsoever that a sane person would listen to the subliminal programming of mainstream media any longer. And even if you're on Fox News, the supposed one allowed Republican channel, imagine that. What do we have, 8?
Well, they
declared Democratic channels and one Republican?
They say they're conservative, not just Republican. Conservative. Mm-hmm. They say they're fair and balanced, but anything but. I'm sorry, you know how I feel about fake Fox News. They need to do a much better job before they get high rankings in my book.
So just think about that. We don't have any true news. The news is supposed to keep the first, second estate, what would in the old days be called the ecclesiastical and then the political or the monarchical groups of country, separate from we the people, the common people. And then the fourth estate, news, the media, communication, intelligence, is supposed to inform us so that we will not be overwhelmed by these assumed authorities of the first and second estate. Well, we've explained how that breaks down into the judicial system and into the political system. And these ideas have to be, unfortunately, overthrown from time to time. And so the mainstream media at this point couldn't be any worse of an enemy of the state or an enemy of anyone who's watching it, because we've explained to you that all of them use Avid, and Avid is a prompter that basically tells them what to say, taken from Reuters, Thompson, and from the Associated Press. Nobody's writing any news anymore. Nobody's doing any news. It's completely propaganda. It's read to you, and at the same time, subliminally, you are being told to believe it. And you will believe it. After literally just a few minutes, you have no choice. And they will admit this. We've shown it again and again in our intelligence reports that there are literally hundreds of ways that you are being subliminally programmed to go with what they want you to. Now, if we know that overtly the words coming out of all of mainstream media are completely democratic, as a matter of fact, you have CNN saying literally that they were basically working for Hillary. They couldn't have done anything. They were bragging. They couldn't have done anything more to get Hillary elected. What? Wait a second. Think for a second. Then how is that legal? Then they need to say it is a political. It needs to say it's a political donation to her party. The entire mainstream media during the entire election between Trump and Hillary, when it came down to the two of them, every single news report was negative against Trump, positive for her. Therefore, the billions of dollars that would have represented need to now be claimed as donations to the Democratic Party. Now, George Soros gave his $6 billion over those 9 years or 10 years it was about, through super PACs and through last-minute blitzkrieg attacks of subliminal messages and paid political announcements on the television. And they were convinced, they had done the statistics, that would make sure that they would win. And then they now know, as we pointed out recently, that Harvard has shown that between 6 to 8 million illegal aliens voted during the last presidential election. And as we know, they usually vote Democratic because they're following the subliminal programming. So when we talk about Andrew McCabe, wait a second. Andrew McCabe? Wait. No one in America who watches mainstream media even knows who that is anymore. He's the only one who Horowitz pointed at that said that there might have been something wrong, that there could have been a leak, that he wasn't completely honest in remarks that he made to them in the investigation. Let's put it in real perspective. Andrew McCabe had 5 investigations against him. 1 for his wife, Jill McCabe, and the money that came from Hillary, because at the same time, he was investigating Hillary. Let's remember that he was being investigated because of his association with Uranium One. He covered up the Uranium One deal, and the Russian spies and the Putin's company, Rosatom, had a company in America, and that company, the head of it, went to jail, and it was Andrew McCabe who covered that up also. So you have, those are 3 investigations. Then you have his leaks, and the leaks that he had were so well known that it was institutionalized, and he was already being looked at for the leaks long before Horowitz came along. And then his last investigation is that basically he had been, everyone had complained about him, that he had broken ranks and went into every single FBI investigation that had anything to do with the Clintons or Russia. So he covered up the Clinton investigation into their foundations, and he covered up any Russian meddling because he was working directly with Strzok. He was basically one of Strzok's chief bosses at that time, as Comey was trying to hide and act like he didn't know what the FBI counterintelligence department was doing. And Bill Priestap, I'm sure I say his name wrong, what are they? Prestap, I think they say it. But anyway, Bill Priestap,
Well, hopefully, pretty soon, we don't need to remember their names. They'll be inmate number 4674.
Absolutely, because he is as guilty as anyone, and no one has done anything about it. Even after his testimony, when he basically admitted that he committed crimes, Peter Strzok, in his testimony, admitted he committed many crimes. Nothing happened. Isn't that incredible? I mean, all someone had to say is, are those your texts? Yes. Were you using a government phone? Yes. Were you carrying on an affair with those? That's the reason you didn't give us the $55,000. Horowitz allowed you, Peter Strzok, to determine which of the texts you would give us, having removed from them any supposed alleged personal remarks and all the other evidence. So, just the fact, all you'd have to do is ask him 5 questions.
But there wasn't an affair going on is my thing.
That's why I said alleged.
That's alleged. And of course, I read the tweet the way it was written. He called them text massages. And, that's kind of the way it is. The FBI has become nothing more than a text message and massage parlor. They can't find any kind of major crimes, even when they exist right under their roof. POTUS later goes and corrects the spelling and calls it, text messages.
And really, the only things you're seeing out of the Justice Department and the FBI right now are things like James Wolfe and Ali Watkins. Nothing happens, by the way. Nothing happens. The hugest leaks that you can imagine directly out of the Senate Intelligence Committee. The director of the staff, the intelligence staff members for the Senate Intelligence Committee, he's leaking everything like a sieve. And what happens? Nothing. But the FBI found that he did that. Can't count how many leaks there were. It was institutionalized, and nothing happens. Comey's leaks to the New York Times and his good buddy there, nothing happens. Podesta gives $12 million illegally to Perkins Coie to give Fusion GPS to work with Russians and foreign agents. Nothing happens. But it all comes out in the light. If something were to happen, it would really clog up the system, because there would be literally hundreds of people who would have to be prosecuted. At this time, let's just remember that any of these people, like Comey, used a private Gmail account, and he did personal work on it, some of which was classified. Hello? He goes to jail for that. So did Obama. So did Loretta Lynch. So did John Kerry. And they all did it to hide their criminality.
But he calls the FBI that once had a stellar reputation, and I started thinking about that. And folks, take a moment and think: what major thing have you, in your lifetime, do you recall the FBI doing that was so stellar? For example, when I look at my lifetime, I see that they did not solve the JFK assassination. The Zodiac killer went on for years and years and years. 9/11 was not resolved because we citizens know more than what that stupid report put out. I mean, what has the FBI done other than to protect the criminals that are running rampant in our country?
They put Martha Stewart in jail.
Oh, Martha Stewart for baking something the wrong way.
I thought it was for folding the sheets incorrectly.
I don't know.
I can't remember. Or they'll put, every once in a while, they'll put a feather in their cap by putting a mafia boss in jail. Hello? You've known for decades and generations they were mafia bosses and you never put them in jail. You don't put a George Soros in jail for tax evasion, but you can go after a little person with the FBI spending millions of dollars on Paul Manafort because Rick Gates seemed to have ripped him off. Paul Manafort, who made president after president, who put the president in Ukraine twice. This man messed up on moving some money from an offshore account to his own personal account in America. I don't believe that. Did Rick Gates commit those crimes under his name? I believe that. Because Rick Gates was just kind of a bimbo. You know, Trump hated him, and he really only used Manafort because he had to. But anyway, let's go back to Andrew McCabe. No one could be any more guilty than Andrew McCabe. He's the only person fingered in the Horowitz fake inspector general looking at the politicalization of the FBI and the DOJ. If it couldn't possibly be any more politicized, and yet nothing happened. A few people were moved around. A bunch of people jumped ship and quit. And a couple people got demoted. And one person, Andrew McCabe, may lose his retirement. No, he probably won't. So what's going on here? Trump just ordered them to preserve the documents. He said, I want Andrew McCabe's text messages. Now, watch them disappear, just like the 55,000 disappeared. Watch them come back after Horowitz handles them, but only 283 are released. Oh, that's what's going to happen with Andrew McCabe's text messages. But as we said all along, if Comey's, McCabe's, Victoria Nuland, Loretta Lynch, John Kerry,
Susan Rice, Obama himself, did you mention that?
Obama, Valerie Jarrett, if any of their text messages were released, the private ones on top secret secure lines, or they're ones where they took that material over to their private Gmail accounts and their text messages and their phones, which weren't secure. Looking at either one of those, or even getting the rest of the 55,000 of Strzok and Page, the two people who were leading this charge against Trump and clearing Hillary, they'd all go down. So is that going to happen? Well, here's what we said just some weeks ago, because you got so fed up that you started yelling like I used to yell, and you said you wanted these FBIers to come out and be whistleblowers. And guess what? They did. And now we have some of the best FBI pertinent, exact information that it all started with McCain, and that McCain's guy, Henry Kerner, and McCain's guy, David Kramer, are the ones who started the dossier. And they started it in the Senate Intelligence Committee, telling them that they'd get Christopher Steele to come over and testify before them about a dossier that had yet to even exist and supposedly wasn't even thought of until July when John Brennan thought it up. No, it was in existence long before it, and John McCain, because FBI whistleblowers have come out and mainstream media are picking up these things and they're reporting them, just like the James Wolfe incident with Ali Watkins. They're reporting these things. Now, they don't report it right and they don't report it true, and they end up siding on the side of evil, but it doesn't matter. It's still coming out. So the whistleblowers in the FBI have done exactly what you asked them to do, Betsy. They are coming forward, and they are turning the evil ones pulling them into the light. And so, John McCain, you better stay hidden, because now we know of your criminal activities.
Where is John McCain? I want to see a recent video of him waving from the hospital bed, or, some motion of life.
I agree with you. And that any governor would simply put someone in that office, even for a temporary position, because they were related to him
Oh, that is just
disgusting.
It is disgusting.
That is so un-American.
It is so un-American because we aren't a monarch, and you don't get your title because of who your mama and daddy are.
And that's what we fight against, and that's why fake justice works. Fake titles, fake entitlements, fake power, fake monarchical power given to just...
Don't forget the Esquires.
Yeah, well, you have to be a lawyer, or you basically hardly have any standing in one of these courts.
Because they created their own language that only the lawyers understand, and their own rules, and you can't go in there. You see, if you think that you're going to go to court to get justice, you're not. The courts are all rigged. It's better to try to find a way to settle out of court with arbitrators whose professions were at one time engineers. Engineers should be all of our arbitrators.
I've heard that suggested by brilliant people. I think it's a very good idea because lawyers aren't supposed to be involved in politics according to the 13th Amendment of the original U.S. Constitution. And we can see what happens when they do get involved. Let's look at Mark Elias of Perkins Coie.
I want to look at the DNC filing a lawsuit against the Russian Federation.
It was unbelievable that the DNC has now filed yet another lawsuit, a bogus lawsuit. The first one was thrown out for being frivolous, and it was against everybody that they thought that they could accuse of bothering Hillary during the election. This time they've named, the GRU of Russia. They've named the entire Russian Federation.
President
so the DNC
Trump,
is suing President Trump and
Donald Trump Jr., WikiLeaks, Julian Assange.
Every name that Hillary wakes up in the middle of the night screaming, they put into this stupid, and I mean stupid, lawsuit. And what is it that they conspired against Hillary? Wait a second. You just showed who you are. Just change it around. It's the exact opposite of what you're saying, and it would be true. So again and again, they try to get out in front of the narrative, or they try to lead you by the nose with subliminal programming in a narrative that is not true with just look into the facts. And if you really follow it, then you just need to pinch yourself and wake up, because it's nothing more than the dream of opposition research. It's the very thing that Andrew McCabe was working with. Remember, Andrew McCabe was deeply, deeply involved with the dossier and Christopher Steele. He knew every step of the way. And Bruce Orr, he was using Nellie Orr, and Nellie Orr had recently worked for him. And she was working on a thing called Open Source Works, which is what they used to gather the information for the dossier. And so Nellie Orr might as well have been an extension of the FBI. And then she was the go-between to Bruce Orr in the DOJ, and Bruce Orr was bunk buddies with Christopher Steele, who said, I can't stand Trump being elected. I will do anything, Steele says, to make sure Trump does not get elected. Anything. I can't let it happen. I can't let it happen. He came over and volunteered this. That is called meddling in the election by a foreign nation. He was forced to do that by his boss, Sir Richard Dearlove, and the whole Privy Council and their whole little intelligence group, which we've gone into in great detail. So that was where it really happened. So Andrew McCabe was there the whole time. He knew exactly what was going on. He covered for the State Department. He covered for the CIA. He covered so that James Clapper didn't even know what was going on. But then James Clapper is not an intelligent man. And that's seen because he can't even lie properly. He tells lies and lies and lies and lies.
Well, how do you lie properly?
Well, you try out one lie and you stick to it.
Okay.
But if you keep changing it, or you change it twice in one sentence, or 3 times in one sentence, or every single time you come on the air, you tell another big fat lie and you play like everything you said before you never said.
Why
like
is he
Comey?
even on a talk show? He should be retired and get his mouth shut with all the securities that he held.
His security clearance should be pulled permanently. Of course, his access should have been denied a long time ago. He's an enemy of the state, and what he's doing is against all of his security clearances, so it should be revoked, and he should be put in jail for what he's done, because what he's done is he revealed privileged conversations with the current president of the United States and matters that were in effect, that he admits, putting informants in that election, which was an attempted coup d'etat. By his own words on the news, he admits his attempted coup d'etat.
Next tweet. The riots in Charlottesville a year ago resulted in senseless death and division. We must come together as a nation. I condemn all types of racism and acts of violence. Peace to all Americans.
This time he got out ahead of the game, got ahead of the narrative, and said that last time they said he didn't specifically condemn the right-wingers. Well, why didn't he? The right-winger, the very same guy who's been doing this all over the country and started in Charlottesville before, Kessler, was a left-wing Occupy Wall Street leader. And from one week to the next, he went from being far left to far right. All he's doing is gathering in targets for the left to attack. This is not a right-wing activity. This is a George Soros-sponsored activity. He has been paid since he was in Occupy Wall Street through one organization after the next. Just look at the titles of the organizations he represents and look at Tides Foundation. They donate. All the other groups that are going to be coming out to fight them in Washington, D.C. today and tomorrow, just look closely. Their leaders are all paid. And they're all paid. Just look at the names of the organizations. We've already shown you this. There's 184 of them. There might be one or two that aren't directly paid by Soros, Open Society, or Tides Foundation, but it's a highly unlikely. They're not very active if they are. The really active ones, Black Lives Matter, number one donor, George Soros. Antifa, number one donor, George Soros. He didn't even hide it, folks. And he had donated billions. Now he's donated $18 billion. And so what we're going to see is they want to do the same thing they're doing with things like QAnon. They say it's right-wing, it's Trump, Trump's right-wing, it's conspiracy, Trump's conspiracy. Take Trump off Twitter. You see, that's the logic. And that's what they're trying to do. Trump knows that he's working behind the scenes to take down all of them because they're all going to have to crash. And if he does what we have recommended, which I'm sure he's at least that smart, if he freezes the central bank stock that is now 1/3 of the central bank's entire assets, all of them, all 12 of the central banks that are part of the United States Federal Reserve, have 1/3 of their assets in stock market, and that would mean FANG. That would mean the tech giants. If he freezes that, what will happen is...
Oh, that's funny.
It'll blow their minds. It's what's happening with the stock market right now. That it just keeps going up and up and up until he said, okay, you can pull the plug now, and now let it run, not by controlled measure, but let it run naturally. And what happens? 500-point gains, 500-point losses.
Are you speculating, or are you saying that's happened right now?
That's what's happening right now. He released the valve on the plunge protection team in the Exchange Stabilization Fund. And he now has told the Fed, you don't control monetary policy. I do.
Yeah.
And he's now done that again and again. He did it with China recently. He's done it with the Fed. He's told them now, he's threatened them, basically, that if they raise rates one more time, that's it. And if he means that's it, remember, he didn't like the stock market. There's much better ways to do venture capital investment in corporations, especially once you get derivatives and longs and shorts and bets and puts and calls out of the business. That's a gambling casino. Get that out, and then it could run honestly. Trump wouldn't mind that. But if the central bank controls 1/3 of the stock market, they can crash it.
And then what about the Federal Reserve?
Federal Reserve, that's odious debt. We don't have to pay that at any time he wants. He simply says, I'm not paying that. That's not even an act of Congress.
It's not even worth
It's a national defense action.
Yes, and it's not even worth the paper that the debt was printed on, or now what we'd say the digits it was printed on. It just goes poof away. There'll be some repercussions, but patriots out here have been prepared for several years waiting for this.
The same people who own the Fed, and they'll lie and tell you that the U.S. taxpayers own the Fed. That is a lie. And the central banks, that is a lie. We own a percentage. There is a give and a take that happens, but their take is so big that it is just unbelievable. They set, like a few years ago, they usually get, they for every 3 to 5 years, they put in their bill. They put in a $20 billion bill for just running the Fed when Obama was still in office. And the Congress came back and said, we're going to give you 4.5 instead of your 20 billion that you want. And they fought it, and they lost. Because why? They have no power. The Fed has no power. It is an illusion. The same people who own the Fed are the same people who are fighting, who own the election machines, who own the mass control, mass deception, subliminal programming companies. They're PR companies. This is considered part of daily normal business work in the capitalistic world. And they don't think it's bad. And globalists are massively into this. How do you think they got Europe to go for the European Union? How do you think they got Article 13 passed so that the GDPR got passed so there's no more free speech? How do you think that happened, folks? It's the same methods being used here. We've gone into them, the Atlantic Council's Digital Forensic Research Laboratory has taken over Facebook, and Google's new digital news initiative has taken over the mainstream media, and the Avid prompters and the basically the writing of all news, the mainstream media through ISIS management. So it's very clear what's happening, but it's also clear that these people are being called out for the first time in their history. And many people are waking up. And now you see that that the far left is no longer hanging together. We have to thank people like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Thank you, Nancy Pelosi.
How about Dianne Feinstein? Throw her in there. You know, her husband, Richard Bloom, owns 10% of Avid Leader Plus. What's that about?
We have to thank Gregory Meeks. We have to thank Al Green, the ones who try to impeach Trump without a crime when they themselves have paid off the people they have sexually assaulted on Capitol Hill with that secret fund, the Ethics Secret Fund, which is simply a racket. It's paid political immunity for sex attacks on Capitol Hill. They attack their workers. This is common. $17 million was paid in just a number of years in these settlements, and no one gets to see them. They're all sealed, and every person signs a non-disclosure agreement. That's what we're dealing with here, folks. This is institutionalized criminality. It's exactly what Trump said it was. It is such a disgusting swamp. It's like that swamp water that they allowed out into the ocean in Florida that's killing everything, killing all the fish and the manatee and the whales and destroying industries, and people can't go to the beach without wearing a gas mask. No one's even talking about that. What is that? That's the swamp water. That's the heat that went on that giant lake, and then they released it. The Army Corps of Engineers released this poisonous water into the ocean. They thought the ocean could handle it. No. This is what releasing the swamp too fast causes to happen.
That's a very good analogy, because people get very anxious, and so do I, and we have to be careful. Our swamp gases, if released too quickly, can kill you.
They're going to kill people on both the left and right. Trump is in the middle. He's not a rightist. He's not a rightist like a John McCain. For heaven's sakes, John McCain was the most criminal person on Capitol Hill overtly. He went to foreign countries and did deals with them for military deals. He started wars. He fomented wars everywhere. And no one did a thing. Why? Because it was institutionalized. Now, that institution is so filthy, it's so disgusting, it's so toxic that those waters cannot be let out all at once. They have to be let out gently. So you see Republicans jumping ship because they're so criminal they don't want to get caught. You see Democrats jumping ship that are really criminal. Then you see the most criminal fighting like crazy, saying crazy things, showing who they truly are. But what is really happening? We're seeing the real heroes like Jim Jordan, like Devin Nunes, who they're attacking viciously, both of them, like Grassley, like Meadows, like Gates. Like there are great heroes on the Hill, on the Washington, D.C. Capitol Hill, and we salute them, and we salute those patriots. But there are going to be many deaths that come from draining this swamp.
Figuratively speaking.
No, I mean deaths. I mean people are killing over this. Remember, Obama was on a rampant serial killer murdering rampage with the Secretary of State, Hillary Clinton. The Arab Spring was all created by them. How many people died? They're still dying over these things. Refugees are dying every day. People die in Darfur. People died in Rwanda. People died in Sudan, North and South, in Congo, and Zaire, all over the place. And no, it never even made the news. These were murders. And so what we decide through our representatives on Capitol Hill creates the death of millions. This is no exaggeration. For instance, how many people have now been murdered in Iran because Trump said he was thinking or going to stop participating in the deal and put the sanctions back on? Now the sanctions are back on. Iran, what did they do? 150 missiles were launched from Palestine towards Israel. There's a full war on the Israeli-Palestinian border, and it has been funded through Obama giving Iran cash. Then Angela Merkel, through George Soros, is going to give them $400 million in cash through their through the German bank, and it got caught, and the SEC and the United States federal government stopped it. That would have gone straight to more missiles to Yemen. Yemen just wrote a letter to the heads of Yemen, and the rebels in Yemen wrote to the United States government and thanked them for putting the sanctions on Iran because it has basically slowed the war down to almost a stop. But Obama bombed Yemen nonstop for years and allowed Iran, by giving them money and not watching them giving missiles, giant missiles to Yemen, to Somalia, to the on and on. So what we're talking about, I'm sorry to have to need to qualify that word. When I say murders, I actually do mean literally, unfortunately, that we have had presidents who knew that they were murdering hundreds of thousands of people. They consciously knew they were murdering innocent people.
Wow. Okay, the last tweet for this audio. I am proud to have fought for and secured the lowest African American and Hispanic unemployment rates in history. Now I'm pushing for prison reform to give people who have paid their debt to society a second chance. I will never stop fighting for all Americans.
65% of prisoners in America are illegal aliens. If we had proper immigration laws, none of those people would be in our jails, many of whom we pay over $1 million a year for them to be on death row. Then we give them lawyers to defend them when they are not citizens. So when he talks about prison reform,
room in these prisons for the citizens that we are going to be locking up in there.
Absolutely. The SES members who should just throw in the towel and just march on into the prison. But they won't go there because they're the ones who made the mess of the prisons. They're the ones who gave these contracts to criminals, basically, Vanguard and others. And then politicians.
And Serco, don't forget, Serco's in the mix.
Oh, Serco, and through Vanguard is a huge investor in Serco. Mm-hmm. People like Jeff Sessions become quite rich. The more people they put in jail, that's the reason almost everything he's said since he's gone into office is to put more people in jail. Think of it. He hasn't helped Trump one iota, but he's come out and he wants to put more people who smoke marijuana in jail, though marijuana and CBDs derived from hemp are some of the greatest healers now that are being found in modern medicine. But he wants to put those people in jail. He wants to seize your property before you've even been charged with a crime. I mean, look who Jeff Sessions is. He is an insane man. I don't know what century he lives in or what is on his mind, if he has a mind, but what he does is sheer evil.
I still see people out there in the comment boxes thinking that Jeff Sessions is working undercover with Trump and he's going to be pulling out a big win, and pretty soon Jeff is going to show us that he's a white hat.
Let me just say, anyone who takes Trump's words and says that they're the opposite of what he says is mistaken. Now, I could call them names, but go ahead. I'm going to leave it blank here. Yeah. Fill in all the worst names that you can call a person now. That's what they are. Because Trump is telling the truth. Now, you can read between the lines, and sometimes it's a joke when he says the lovely Lisa Page. He's just like, we now agree with Betsy. It's alleged. That's how they were able to get rid of 55,000 text messages, because we were sex texting like so many politicians before. So they just simply say, oh, it's private, we can't let you see those. Oh, no. What's really going on is institutionalized crime. Obama is basically just an outright criminal. It was the mafia and the mob and radical Islamic fascism come to the White House all rolled in one ball. When we talk about prison reform, according to Trump, he's going to save so much money, it will be unbelievable. 1,000 cases where we have provided free lawyers to illegal immigrants coming across our border, and then we used the FBI and the DOJ and ICE and all state and local agencies to try to find those people to come to their court cases. And sometimes when we get them back, we find out, that by the time they come back that they've committed many crimes, many murders in the country they came from, and they're rapists. And then we find out that even while they were here with when we couldn't find them, they were committing crimes. And so there's all of those crimes, but we can't charge them with those crimes. So what do we do with them? We might put them in jail for huge amounts of time while they have a lawyer representing them. Does anybody know how much that costs? Trump once quoted what it costs to represent those 425,000 at this moment cases pending. Billions of dollars. Why can't we use those billions to build a wall so none of those cases would ever happen? Now the deal is that it's no longer, remember when Obama said unaccompanied minors who come to the border automatically become citizens, and then if their parents get across the border later, they become citizens. That's what Obama said. That's insanity. He actually provided transportation for those unaccompanied minors to be immediately, and many of them not minors, to be moved into communities away from their parents where they never saw their parents again. But this is what the Obama administration was doing. So when we're talking about criminality like MS-13, why arrest an MS-13 gang member where they're going to be released later? You just wasted a lot of money. You have no authority over them because the local agencies don't inform ICE to come pick them up. That's the reason ICE now has to go out in the community and grab them, because the local community law enforcement doesn't do their job. Now, let's just think about that for a second. Let's say I'm running for an office and I say, I want you to elect me on the platform of lawlessness. I am not going to allow the laws concerning immigration to be enforced. I'm not going to allow law enforcement laws to be enforced. I'm not going to allow the Constitution to be enforced. I'm not going to allow the U.S. Bill of Rights. I am basically going to say anything that gets me elected, that gets me money, and that gets me money from the party. So whatever the party line is, that's what I'm going to say. That's what most politicians are running on. They're running on lawlessness, both Republican and Democrat. So that's the question. MAGA means following the law. The end to Obama lawlessness, Hillary Clinton lawlessness, Bill Clinton lawlessness, the Bush lawlessness, the Carter lawlessness, the lawlessness that has plagued our White House since the death of John F. Kennedy. So what we're really talking about here is we have the wrong people in jail. We need to let out the millions of people who are there for having a marijuana joint. We need to take all the 65% that are illegal aliens and send them back to the countries that they came from. And if they don't take them, or if they come back across the border instead of putting them in jail where they belong,
we will defund you.
Correct. No more U.S. aid, no more trade with you, no more most favored nation trading status, no participation in any treaties with you, trade or otherwise.
And if they don't want them and we don't want them, then maybe we're going to have to just build some big cargo ships, and just let them float around the sea. Because I don't want them here in this country.
Why would we keep them if we know
if the other countries
they're going
won't
to be
take
released? Then it looks like we may have to go back to the death sentence.
We have to go back to this. I don't know if you remember back in the 70s, the boat people. They were people without a country. Mm-hmm. And you can put a jail in on a large boat, and you can just ship it out.
Once we have a wall, we can say to Mexico or any country they come from, if they come back, it's your expense for us to send them back, or we do no more business with you.
But what if the countries don't take them? Why would they want these criminals?
Then we do what has happened with George Soros and the migrants, the supposed migrants. It's an invasion. You get a boat, and you drop them off on the shore of the country they came from, and then you leave
And
with
if
an
they-
empty boat.
And if they don't have a shore, then we helicopter them in with parachutes.
Whatever
I
it
just want to
takes.
get the logistics down because they need to go back where they came from.
Absolutely. Yes, you deliver them any way necessary. They are not ours. They are not our criminals. We do not need to spend $1 million a year because they want to kill people because the countries they come from don't want to have them in their jails and they don't want to deal with them. Those countries produce those people. Now, it is true, I must admit, in some cases, the United States of America had something to do with some of the chaos in these countries that have produced countries that demand asylum. But right now, because the Democrats were trying to sneak in a law, they were trying to change the asylum rules to say, if you even fear, then that is an excuse for asylum. Fear what? Fear what? That's all it takes to seek asylum in America? Well, now the big deal right now is a massive amount of pregnant women coming across the border. Now, for a while, it was Asian, Chinese women. I know this is hard to believe, but we showed you the pictures of the signs that were in Chinese because so many Asian women were being dropped off in Mexico and human trafficked to the border pregnant. So the time for lawlessness has ended, and that's what Trump is saying about what he can do with the prisons. And it's a very important thing to focus on, and I think that it's imperative that he brings it forward. And what he's going to do with it is going to probably shock everyone, most especially Jeff Sessions.